the last section, I was using white paper to wax on, and this time I'm using coloured paper. I've also pre-dyed this. This was just taking an imprint of another batik that I did, so it's multicoloured. This one here was the wrapping paper I mentioned, and it's got the black dots, so when I put the dye on there, that'll show through. Some very thin part of a table napkin, very delicate, but it's got little roses on it. And I've got another napkin here. And this is what happened. I actually used, this is pre-dyed, it was a flower napkin, and I used this tool, which is an old-fashioned potato masher, and I dipped it into the wax, and I just did quick imprints of the wax all over, and then I applied the dye, blue dye over it, and hence you can see the colour of the pink flowers coming through and the green surrounding areas. So when you use tools, you have to put it in, keep it a little bit warm. I'm going to use different tools than when I worked on the white. I've got a chanting here, and I've got a couple of cookie cutters, and this is a potato masher. I'm using a stamp and just going to do quick marks going across. I'm not particularly worried what's going to happen. I'm just doing it, just showing you the idea that it doesn't really matter, because you can turn it into anything. Now, all I'm doing at the moment is just doing patterns, but if you want, you can actually use the tissue paper and other kinds of paper and create much more pictorial effect. So I'll put that one away, and this time I'm going to use a chanting, and I've got a paper towel to catch the drips, and this one flows reasonably well, so I can just do a little doodle. If I like areas, I'll keep them. Some chantings really flow very well, and that's why it's quite good to have sort of smoothish paper, because it'll pick up the ridges and it'll go a little bit bumpy. Now here I'm going to go round a few circles round the dots, and even round this one, so I get a little bit of white. Now, of course, that's going to turn into a white circle, whilst if I come over here onto the orange, I'm going to get lots of yellow and orange ones. So now I will apply some colour randomly. I'll start with blue, and I'll go onto this one here, and you can see it's sort of magical when you go right across, and you can see the colours where you've waxed coming through. You can build up on different colours. You'll learn about how yellow, when you put a blue across, it goes green, and when you put a pink across blue, you'll get a lovely purpley effect. And you can cover it all if you want. Now, when it's wet, you cannot apply wax onto it. You have to wait for this to dry. So I'm just going to go all the way over there. And what's fun is you're not quite sure where you've waxed, and then it comes through, a bit like magic. I then have one, it's not a masterpiece in any way, but it's actually covered in wax. It's lots of layers. I had some orange tissue paper. I waxed some squiggly lines on it, and then what I did was I discharged the colour, and it left, where it was waxed, it left the orange squiggles. I'm just going to add things just to show you. It may not be very artistically done, but I'm tearing a bit of this. This has already got quite a bit of wax on. So I'm just going to tear a bit and then decide, okay, I would like a bit of pinky zigzags at the very bottom. And I'm using an iron, and I'm just using the tip of the iron, and then I'm going to iron part of it in. Now, in fact, I might iron the whole thing in so you can see what happens. You can see some of the colour coming through on the back. And then you've got the pink lines there. And the same with, this was originally black tissue paper. I discharged it. Notice how it's become quite pale surrounding, so I must have had quite a lot of bleach on that. And I'm just going to tear a bit, just to show that, you know, the advantage of doing this. Maybe I don't want to have this bit of black here. And by tearing it, it's nice to have sort of soft edges. So I could put this coming across over here. At the moment, it's quite, you can't see through, it's opaque. But here, when I put that across, you can see the black lines coming through. That's one idea. And this is just an example of one that has got layers. It's got some orange tissue paper underneath, and it's got some of the pinky, which has been discharged. But this is just showing you an example. And this is just paper which has been covered, which is now a wax paper, but with different layers. Then I've got one here. Here I've got wax tissue paper, which I've doodled on. It was turquoise blue tissue paper. I discharged it, it came back to white. I added the green and the yellow and a little bit of orange. But an overall piece of work, I thought, I don't particularly like it. So I've got a mount or mat, and with a little aperture, with an aperture, and sometimes you can go over and you think, well, I like that, or I like, you know, I might like that bit, and so on. And when you come across a bit that you do like, then you could draw around it and cut it, and then it could be a little picture. We're coming to the end of the Batik on Paper workshop, but before I go on to the Batik on Fabric workshop, I'd like to show you some of the things and what we've done. If you remember, I started off with some dotted paper in one of my examples, and this was tissue paper that was wrapped up in something that was given to me. So I decided that what I would do, I would put wax on it and dye, and I created sort of circular Kandinsky type of piece. What I've done is I folded in the corners and spray glued it, so now it's a book cover. And basically what I've done is done exactly the same. These cards here, I've chosen areas and I've ironed the wax out, and then I've spray glued them. And this card over here, I started with the black tissue paper, I waxed raindrops, I then discharged the colour and it went back to white, and then I added blue and then spray glued it and turned it into a card. And I did the same with this box. I had some tissue paper, I'd waxed it and dyed it and ironed the wax out, and then I decided, well, I'll spray glue it and cover it. And this book here, I just want to show you that you don't have to iron out all the wax. You can leave the wax in. And in this case, I had a brush, and I just did quick brush strokes. So I didn't want a solid line all the way through, so I got more streaks. I started with white paper here, and then I did turquoise, and I did exactly the same, but going the opposite way. And then I applied some yellow and also some magenta dye. I decided I wanted to make some Christmas wrapping paper. And even though it's tissue paper, it's actually quite strong with the wax in when I ironed it out. I used a star stamp, and I waxed all over in any old way, and they stayed white, and then I applied lots of multitude of colours and then re-stamped on top. And then I decided, well, actually, what I'd like to do is maybe not use it as Christmas paper. I might try and put it around here, but normally what I usually do is I spray glue it. But in this case, I just want to show you what the effect would look like. So I'm going to wrap it round. And when you work with batik, both on fabric and on paper, it's really very effective when you have a light behind it, because it shows up the colors really well. And I'll turn on the light, and there you have a multitude of colors glowing in the night. So those are a few of the things that you can make with paper. Have a bit of fun and explore.